Hello everyone, my name is Aqsa Bashir and I am an instructor of advertising and media ethics at the College of Journalism and Communications in the University of Florida. And I'm also a PhD student finishing up my dissertation. Before coming to the United States, I got my undergrad in Lahore, Pakistan from the Foreman Christian College, and I got my master's in advertising from the University of Florida Department of Advertising, College of Journalism and Communications. Back in undergrad, we didn't really distinguish between what advertising and public relations is. It was all basically taught under the same banner of marketing. So if you wanted to be more creative and you wanted to be going into the advertising industry, you interned at advertising agencies and you did projects that were more creative based. But if you wanted to go into public relations, then you interned at specific public relations companies where you would network and get yourself known into the industry to get a job when you graduated. Before coming to the United States, I also worked for Newsweek Pakistan, which is one of the leading English news magazines in the country, and I was their marketing and sales executive. My job was to make sure that our ad spaces were bought by relevant companies that whose messages and whose ideologies synchronized with the magazine's ideologies and views. And then my job also was to draft contracts for them, to acquire new companies to advertise with us as well. And I also handled client relations and services that included just establishing a relationship with the companies as well. Um, so while including all of this attending meetings and getting new clients, we did have to attend a lot of socials and a lot of travels was involved, but one always had to be in the zone of professionalism. We were never on vacation when we were out working. A typical day for me would look like I would get to the office by 8:30. I would make sure that all my meetings and my schedule was organized so that I could start work at 9 a.m. when somebody brought me tea. So tea is a huge part of our culture, and usually tea breaks are more accepted than smoke breaks or lunch breaks or things like that. So we would get like an hour off for lunch, but tea breaks were more acceptable in our culture. Um, Also, about twice a week, my fellow executive, marketing executive, and I would go on rounds. And we would usually head out after lunch to go meet with clients and hopefully potential clients as well, in order to just, keep ourselves abreast of the situation and make sure we get our foot through the door before some other agency or some other ad space company did before. So we used to approach companies usually we would approach companies directly, like Marriott or Emirates Airline or Turkish Airline, and we would ask them to purchase ad space within our magazine for either a contract or for one issue. It depended on what they wanted and what our issue space was like for that week. But we also considered media buying agencies or advertising agencies. When we went out to seek clients, because media buying agencies, as some of you advertising people would know, are important to target when it comes to selling ad space. um, Another helpful tip that I learned during my work at Newsweek Pakistan as their marketing executive was networking. So if you knew somebody in the industry as like a former coworker or a class fellow, it was always easier to establish a contact and then move into a contract after you established a contact. And especially if that person was your friend, it was super easy as well. One thing that I found interesting was that when agents within an agency moved, so like, for example, Ben went from agency A to agency B, usually a company that or a client that Ben was handling went with him. Now, it's not necessary that Ben took them, but it's just that the company was so at ease or trusted Ben so much that they decided that agency A didn't really have what it took if Ben left. So they moved with Ben to agency B. And I, for example, like a very interesting example I remember was that we were PepsiCo had purchased ad space with Newsweek Pakistan, and one of my friends was handling their account in her agency. But when she shifted agencies, PepsiCo moved with her. Um, we also had a number of other ad companies from that same agency that my friend worked in prior, but it was treading thin ice when it came to whether or not we moved to the different agency, and get PepsiCo's account, or do we stay with the first agency and retain the rest of our accounts. So that was a very challenging decision that we had to make as a team. Um, so when you move, remember that people will move within the industry. So when you face such a change of working with the same person in different agencies, make sure you know where your loyalties stand and be prepared for like a tricky business situation. Um, your professor asked me to share some of my challenges as being a woman in the work industry back in Pakistan, where I'm originally from. I feel that yes, it is challenging to be a woman in Pakistan working in the ad agency, but it is more challenging to be a minority woman in a predominantly majority religion. Islam is the dominant religion in Pakistan, and a good 97-98% of the population is Muslim, with very little tolerance towards somebody who professes or confesses their faith other than Islam publicly. So, all my life, I was educated in Christian institutions, and so I was a little sheltered from what the real industry world had um, looked like. But the real world is not that bad if you know how to handle it. The second thing I would say that being a woman is not so much as a problem in Pakistan, especially with the industry changing and a lot of girls are entering advertising and public relations. But I feel being a minority now, especially, is difficult, and you have to be very careful of what you say and how you say it in order not to offend anyone in any way. Um, Also, moving on, your professor asked me to talk about the differences between advertising and public relations. While I explained before that advertising and public relations may be the same, under the same banner, but personally, I think those are very extremely different jobs to do. So, an ad man would predominantly make sure that the ad is made, the client is satisfied, product is being sold, people who intend on seeing the message are actually seeing the message. But public relations, I feel, is more like your lawyer when something goes wrong, or your spokesperson when something goes right. So, just to put an analogy like that, I feel for me, public relation agents are more like a mother who is either very proud of what her child did, aka putting the ad out, or is a very scared mother who's scampering to pick up the pieces and the mess that occasionally the advertising industry does it make sometimes. Referring to some really controversial ads like Burger King has been under fire, Dove has been under fire for some really controversial ads that they make. So, moving on to something in your lecture, Hofstede's cultural dimensions. Hofstede talks about cultural dimensions in 5 or 6 ways and tells how each culture differs from the other based on these criteria. Pakistan is, I feel, a very high power distance society in which age, rank, social status matter a lot. So the older you are, the more respect you get. The richer you are, the more respect you get. The higher in rank you are in the office or the workplace, the more respect you get. We are also a highly, highly collectivist society. So your business is my business, and my child will be raised by the entire village. For us, family ties and social ties are what defines us. So in Pakistan, I will always be known as my father's daughter. I will always be known as my sister's sister or my aunt's niece. My personal identity will be identified by who my relatives are or what city or what village I come from. Um, and we also, when it comes to masculinity, femininity, we are borderline on both. So we do believe that power is needed in order to keep control in society, but we also believe that society needs to flourish under a guiding hand, under a more maternalistic approach or a feminist approach. Women are respected in society when it comes to their roles as teachers or mothers. Um, Other than that, a woman's place is pretty much as described as a more domestic place in the family. Our uncertainty avoidance, I checked up a few sources, and our uncertainty avoidance on some scales was extremely high. I feel that is both yes and no based on how you perceive things. So, we as children are always taught that we need to know and make sure that our future is secure. So, through education, through learning, will we progress in life and will make our future secure. But other in other contexts, we also, because religion is such a huge part of our society and of our lives, that we leave everything to his almighty will. Sometimes when something bad happens, people usually say, oh, it was in the will of God, so we have to accept it as it is. Or sometimes when you don't know what the future holds for you, you are more acceptance of the fact that God is in control of your future. So that way, I feel uncertainty avoidance can be, we could be on a borderline of uncertainty avoidance depending on how strong your beliefs are and what the situation is. In my undergrad, when I came to the United States for the first time for a summer abroad program. I also found that the American society was so individualistic. Everybody was out to look out from them for themselves or their immediate others. It wasn't a collectivist society that I came from. I was also very surprised at how young teenagers were so independent. They found they could drive themselves, they had their own bank accounts, they had part time jobs at university. So that was very surprising for me, which made it more surprising when I found out one of my fellow class fellows was paying for undergrad herself. And I was just like, well, your parents wanted you to go to university and your parents encouraged you to go. Why wouldn't they pay for it? To which she was appalled. She was like, this is my life. Like, why would my parents pay for my education? So these small things in terms of cultural shifts were very appalling for me when I first came here. But slowly I learned like this type of behavior helps you to be independent for the rest of your life as well. Also, people did mention that my English was really good, but my original accent was a little hard to understand. Well, who am I to complain? The American accent is not so warmly welcomed in Pakistan as much as the British accent is. Um, but although non extremist Pakistanis are very fond of Americans, and America in general. So everybody wants to come to America and everybody wants a bright future and in the land of the dreams. But doing business with the American people is very beneficial for the Pakistani economy. The dollar conversion rate speaks for itself. And also, American industry doing business with Pakistan is also very beneficial. A, because the cost of labor in Pakistan is very cheap. Also, it provides you an opportunity to explore a new marketplace, especially if you've never entered that market before. We have a lot of ad agencies in Pakistan that are offshoots of agencies that originated in Chicago or in Paris, but and they are all locally owned, but they are controlled by their head office in their headquarters wherever it is in the world. Coming back to if you as an advertising agent or as a public relations agent wanted to go to Pakistan and practice there, I would highly recommend you do that. At least try your hand at some form of international work while you can. I remember when I worked at Newsweek Pakistan, we had an intern from New York NYU, and when we would take him around, when we would go see clients and everything, he was very welcomed by the clients just because he had a stamp of an American university on them. And you people, being Americans or American educated, will also be warmly welcomed, as was I, NYU student. Um, but I remember when I first worked in Gainesville in an agency, my institution or my undergrad degree did not matter. What mattered was what I could do for the agency, and I learned a lot knowing that there were differences and similarities within the same industry. Advertising in Pakistan and advertising in the United States is pretty much the same, with the difference of what the culture is or what the target audience wants. Um, but overall, how you deal with clients, how you deal with pitches, it is pretty much the same. Both countries, both worlds are out to get clients, are out to outbid the other agency in order to get a contract or so that you can get your commission out of it. It's pretty much the same in Pakistan and in America. But doing business in Pakistan is very lucrative, trust me. And if any of you ever decide on going to that part of the world to practice your advertising or public relations skills, I would highly recommend you just take a crash course in food and language before you leave, because our food and our language is very different, and you really don't want to learn something by experience and that goes wrong. Well, I hope you enjoyed my little talk on my background as an advertising agent in Pakistan, as well as my experience here in the United States. Please feel free to email me if you have any questions. My email is in the bio link below. I hope you all have a wonderful semester, and go Gators!